I should have known from the moment I first saw the convent that something was wrong. It was an imposing structure, crumbling with age, made of darkened stone and tall Gothic windows with cracked stained glass. Hidden deep in a dense forest, the convent of St. Carmela wasn't just abandoned. It fell intentionally forgotten. I had been hired as a heritage restorer to document the interior before it was demolished. My job was simple: photograph, catalog, map architectural details, and recover any artifacts of historical value. I arrived on a gray afternoon. The wind whispered low through the pines, as if the forest itself was muttering forgotten prayers. The heavy wooden door creaked open with a long, splintered groan. Inside, the air was thick, stale with incense and dust. The first thing I noticed was a silence, not the natural quiet of an empty building, but something else. A silence that felt deliberate, like the space didn't want to be disturbed. I set up my gear in the old sister's dormitory, a narrow room with 7 rusted iron beds. Everything looked untouched, as if the nuns had left in a hurry, leaving rosaries hanging from bedposts and folded veils on rough blankets. I began my work, try to ignore the growing feeling that I was being watched. Camera in hand, I moved to corridor after corridor, photographing every crack in walls, every statue, every crumbling relic. It was in the chapel where I first noticed something off. I was setting up my tripod to capture the altar when I heard a whisper coming from behind the pulpit. I told myself it was a wind, but the words, though distorted, sounded like Latin. I recorded the audio just in case. Later, when I played it back, it wasn't a prayer I recognized. The voice said, "Non exer in omnes, una remene." Not all have left, one remains. I tried to rationalize it. Acoustics, echo, imagination. But then the chanting began. Faint at first, barely audible. A discordant female chorus, like multiple voices trying to sing different hymns at once. I only ever heard them when I was alone in the corridors, or in the dark, right before sleep. I convinced myself it was just nerves, until I saw the shadow. It happened on the second day. I was documenting the crypt. There were headstones with names worn away, broken crucifixes, and walls dripping with moisture. As I was photographing a statue of the Virgin, I caught something out of the corner of my eye, a dark figure slipping behind one of the columns. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there, just a soft echo of footsteps that weren't mine. I climbed the stairs quickly, heart racing, ignoring the oppressive weight pressing down on my chest. Back upstairs, I found something had been placed on my backpack, an old leather-bound journal with yellow pages. I swear it hadn't been there before. On the first page, written in faded ink, Sister Celia, enclosed 1893. The next pages were mixed of prayers, diary entries, and increasingly disturbing warnings. She wrote of a presence that watches among the sisters, of an entity that mimicked the nuns and walked the halls at night. She wrote of sisters whispering in tongues they'd never been taught, who fasted for days and never grew weak. One line repeated over and over, "She is still here." That night, I dreamed a procession. I stood inside the chapel, watching nuns in black habits pass silently before me. Their faces were hidden, except for the last one. She turned to look at me. She had no eyes, just 2 deep, dark holes. I woke up gasping, and for a split second, I could still hear her voice at my bedside. "You shouldn't be here." The next morning, I decided to finish the job quickly, but something had changed. The lights in the chapel, broken the day before, were now glowing faintly. Candles and candelabers were lit, though no one had touched them. The pulpit had been wiped clean, as if used recently. And strangest of all, the photos I took of the crypt were corrupted. Every single one showed a figure in a dark habit, standing behind me. I rushed to the archive room, desperate to understand what had happened here. Among the damp papers, I found censored records. In the 1970s, the convent had been secretly investigated by the diocese. Nuns had reported visions, possessions, collective hallucinations. All were evacuated, except Sister Celia. She refused to leave. The report said she believed the evil hadn't been contained, and that if they opened the walls, it would escape. Then it hit me. She hadn't been locked away for penance. She had been sealed in with something. Using a map sketch in her journal, I found herself behind a hidden panel in the library. The stone door had no handle. I pried it open with a crowbar. The air that seeped out was ancient, damp, heavy, almost solid. Inside was a small room, a slab for a bed, a broken crucifix, and scratch marks. Deep gouges in the walls, and a skeleton. Next to bones was a final note, scrawled in trembling ink. She promised I could go if I kept writing, but she lies. She always lies. I heard her before I saw her. Footsteps in the hall, slow, shuffling, like someone walking who had forgotten how. I slammed the cell shut behind me and froze. But when I turned back toward the corridor, she was already there, at the far end, tall, still, veiled in black, face hidden beneath a cowl. She began walking toward me. I ran, through stairs, hallways, past fallen furniture. Behind me, I heard the drag of fabric, the discordant echo of more than one set of feet. I reached the front door, locked, somehow chained shut, with a rusty padlock that hadn't been there before. I pounded on it, screaming for help. That's when I heard the voice, low, right at my ear. You came to replace me. I blacked out. I woke up alone, lying in the chapel. Sunlight streamed through the broken windows. All my equipment was gone. My phone, the photos, the journal, everything. The front door opened effortlessly now. My car was still there, untouched. I drove away without looking back. I emailed a contractor and canceled the project, made up a story about structural instability. I never returned. But sometimes when I'm alone at night, I still hear the whispers, prayers in dead languages. Candles in my apartment flicker for no reason, and in mirrors, I catch glimpses of a black habit behind me. She followed me. I have never spoken about this out loud. For years, I tried to convince myself that it had all been nightmares, distorted memories that children sometimes invent. But I can't deny it anymore. I was there. I saw it. And even now, when I close my eyes at night, I feel as if I'm still inside that boarding school, trucked in that endless corridor. I studied in a Catholic girls' boarding school in the 1980s, a place where silence and discipline mattered more than any affection. I still remember the cold mornings, the smell of wax on polished floors, the echo of the nuns' voices in the long halls. Everything was meticulously organized, meals, prayers, studies. But what marked me the most weren't the rules. It was the nights. It began in my final year when I was 17. I suffered from insomnia, laying awake for hours listening to the breathing of the other girls in the shared dormitory. The atmosphere was already heavy. Tall windows let in only pale moonlight, casting elongated shadows across the floor. And always, at exactly 3 in the morning, I saw the same thing. A nun standing at the far end of the corridor, motionless, staring toward our door. She never moved, never approached, but she was there every single night, in the same place. Her face was hidden beneath the dark habit, impossible to distinguish. At first, I thought it was exhaustion, tricks of sleeplessness, but then details began to appear that I couldn't explain. The corridor lights flickered when she was there, as though the building itself resisted her presence. And sometimes low whispers in Latin drifted from where she stood, unbroken murmurs that seeped into my bones. None of the other girls seemed to notice. When I tried to tell them, they laughed, accused me of making up stories. But then the disappearances began. The first was Clara. One morning her bed was neatly made, untouched, as if she had never slept there. On the pillow lay only her crucifix, the one we were all required to wear on our uniforms. I asked the others, but no one gave me a straight answer. The nun said Clara had been transferred, but wouldn't tell us where. Then it was Helena, then Sophia. Always the same way. Empty beds, crucifixes left behind. That was when I realized all the missing girls had something in common. They had disobeyed. Clara had been caught writing secret letters to a boy. Helena mocked the sisters in whispered jokes during study hours. Sophia had refused to confess a sin she never told anyone about. All of them were, in the nun's words, rebellious against God. And with each new absence, The nun at the corridor became clearer, no longer just a dark silhouette. I could see her long, bony fingers folded before her. I could hear her labored breathing, even from a distance. One night, I glanced at the mirror near our beds, the one we use to check our uniforms, and saw her standing inside the dormitory behind me. When I turned, the room was empty. My body began to unravel. I lost weight. I barely slept. And when I did, the dreams were unbearable. Always the same. I was kneeling in a confessional, but the voice on the other side wasn't a priest. It was hers, rough, rasping, repeating prayers in Latin I could understand. And at the end, always the same words in perfect Portuguese. Lost sheep must be gathered. The nuns noticed my decline, but instead of helping me, they gave me penance. Hours alone in the chapel, kneeling before the altar, whispering prayers while that voice kept echoing in my head. I knew I wasn't alone. The night it all reached its breaking point was a Friday. I was awake, as usual, when I heard footsteps in the hall. Not the firm steps of the living nuns, but a slow, dragging rhythm. I crept to the dormitory door. The corridor was empty, except for her, standing beneath a flickering light. And this time, she began to walk toward me. I backed away, paralyzed, unable to scream. Behind me, a bed creaked. I turned just in time to see Julia's crucifix, my best friend's, lying atop her sheets. The bed was empty. She had vanished without a sound. It was then I understood. The nun wasn't just an apparition. She came for those deemed sinners. But it wasn't ordinary discipline. It was something far older, far darker. Desperate, I fled that night to the archive room, searching frantically through boxes of dusty files. I found yellow documents, records from decades earlier. They spoke of girls taken to the convent basement for spiritual correction. Some never returned. Officially, they had been transferred or withdrawn by their families. But hidden notes described rituals, exorcisms, starvation, punishments bordering on torture, all conducted by a nun whose name was never fully written, only as the Watcher. And I knew it was her, the nun from the corridor. I never learned what they truly did to the girls, or where they went, but the next morning, I found my own crucifix placed neatly on my pillow, though I was still lying there alive. I held in my hand and refused to let go. Days later, my father arrived unexpectedly and withdrew me from the school without explanation. Years afterward, I asked him why. He told me he had received an anonymous phone call warning that I was next. I still don't know who called. I don't know if any of the others escaped. I never saw them again. But every night at 3 sharp, I wake in terror, certain that someone is standing outside my door. And sometimes when I glance into the mirror, I catch a glimpse of a dark habit behind me, a face swallowed in shadow. And I know, with the same certainty as my own name, that she is still watching me. I was only 17 when I was delivered to the convent, handed over by my family as one might send a lamb to slaughter. The century was already nearing its end. Yet for me, the stone walls of that place felt like a return to centuries long gone, as if I had stepped across an invisible threshold and been carried back in time. Everything that was designed to silence the outside world. Heavy gates, narrow windows, corridors that bent at impossible angles. With each step, I felt the echo of something that did not want me there, yet at the same time seemed to be waiting for me. The older nuns welcomed me with restrained smiles, cold as the damp stone walls. Their eyes were so dark that, at times, I could swear they reflected none of the lamplight. It did not take me long to notice a disturbing pattern. During the day, they rarely appeared. It was as though they withdrew into hidden chambers, leaving only the younger novices to fill the common spaces. By daylight, the convent seemed dead, but at night, the corridors came alive with whispers. I would lie down early as ordered, but sleep almost never came. From my narrow cell, I heard the voices spreading through the halls like drafts of wind. They were not prayers in Latin, as we were taught in the chapel. They were drawn-out words in a language I did not recognize, guttural, low, vibrating to a stone and into my bones. Sometimes, the voices were accompanied by footsteps, But when I dared open the door and peer in the corridor, there was never anyone there, only candlelight stretching shadows too long, too alive. One night, returning from the oratory, I swore one of those shadows was watching me. It shifted along the wall, though there was no flame or figure to cast it, and where its face should have been, 2 points of light, eyes glimmered in the dark. My whole body trembled, but I told no one. Instinctively, I knew I must not. As days passed, I noticed another unsettling detail. Some of the elder nuns never came to meals. Our tables were always filled with the same young faces, but the older ones appeared only during collective prayer, shrouded in their black habits, faces half hidden, lips murmuring words that did not match ours. Once, during a prayer, I raised my eyes and saw that while our voices joined in unison, theirs whispered something else. Faster, harsher. Time went on, and the night of my vows drew near. I should have been joyful, but dread consumed me. The senior novices exchanged knowing glances, and the elder nuns, they watched me. I felt their gaze with every step that week, as though they were measuring whether I was ready for what truly awaited. On the night of the ritual, the convent was quieter than ever. The lamps in the corridors had been extinguished, leaving only flickering candles that led to the chapel. I walked alone, clothed in the white habit of one about to renounce the world. Yet the silence soon broke. First, distant whispers, then a strange melody, low, dissonant chanting that reverberated through the stones. It was not Gregorian chant. It was something older, raw, almost animal. In the chapel, they awaited me. The younger novices knelt with heads bowed, too afraid to look at me. The elder nuns stood behind the altar, forming a circle. Shadows cast by the candles tangled in the ceiling beams, as though the convent itself were breathing. The Mother Superior approached. Her eyes, reflecting the flame, burned like embers. She carried a thick leather-bound book, and it was not the Bible. The symbols on its cover belonged to no alphabet I had ever seen. When she began to read, I knew instantly that I was not standing before a Christian rite. The words were the same I had heard whispered in the corridors at night. Impossible sounds, long and resonant, filling the air until my head throbbed. My knees weakened, but hands gripped my shoulders firmly. 2 elder nuns held me fast. "Tonight you join us," the mother murmured, her voice layered, as though 2 voices spoke at once. Not to the God the world knows, but to the one who was here before all churches, the one who never abandons those who give themselves to him. My heart pounded wildly. I wanted to scream, but my mouth would not open. I wanted to flee, but my feet were rooted to the floor. Around me, the chant grew louder, heavier, until the air itself seemed to suffocate. And then I saw it. Behind the altar, where the crucifixes stood, a shadow rose. It was not mere absence of light, but a living shape, pulsing, shifting. Eyes, many eyes, open within it, all of them fixed on me. The mother set before me the convent's crucifix, but it was not gold. It was black, like charred iron, and it pulsed as though blood ran through it. She ordered me to touch it, to take my vows. Eternal obedience, she said. Eternal silence. Eternal servitude. In that moment, I understood. These vows were not symbolic. They were chains. Invisible, unbreakable. I was about to bind myself to something that would never let me go, not even in death. Compelled, I touched the crucifix. A searing burn tore through my skin, yet I could not pull my hand away. Voices filled my head, in tongues I had never learned but somehow understood perfectly. They told me I belonged to them now, forever. The ritual ended as the candles were snuffed out, plunging the chapel into absolute darkness. When I awoke, I was in my cell. The mark still burned into my flesh where I had touched the crucifix. I tried to escape in the days that followed, but the gates were always locked, the keys never seen. Whenever I dared wander in search of a way out, I found only shadows rising before me, eyes watching until my legs gave way. Now I write these words in hope they may reach beyond these walls, but I know it is useless. There is no leaving. Time itself has dissolved here. Nights stretch on without end, and days no longer exist. I am theirs now, and when the next novice crosses those gates, I will be waiting in the circle, beneath the candlelight, as the others once waited for me. For the vows I took were not for this life alone. They were for all eternity.